Chosen one, hey, before you scroll, pause. This message found you on purpose. Not by luck, not by chance, on divine assignment. If you're reading this right now, it's because you've been set apart. Not everyone is built like you. Not everyone has the strength to stay committed when no one's clapping, to keep showing up when it feels like nothing's moving. But you've got something rare. There's a fire in you that refuses to die. A quiet power that kept you aligned even when it would have been easier to compromise. And guess what? That strength just protected you from something you didn't even know was coming. That's how powerful your obedience is. That's how loud your discipline echoes in the spirit. You are not ordinary. You are not overlooked. You are not late. You are in divine timing, under divine covering. And this message is your confirmation. God saw your choices. Heaven took note. And right now, the peace you've been craving, the breakthrough you've been praying for, it's closer than you think. So get ready. Because this isn't just encouragement, it's a spiritual wake-up call. And it's got your name all over it. Let's go. Looking for purpose and peace? Hit subscribe and start the journey. Before the next revelation is released, pause and take this moment seriously. What you're about to hear isn't just inspiration. It's a divine activation. If this resonates with your spirit, don't scroll away. Share it, save it, and let others feel the shift too. Deep gratitude to every heart that stood with this mission, those who've supported, commented, and carried this message forward with faith. You are not background noise. You are a chosen current in this divine wave of awakening. For those who feel something stirring inside, drop 55 in the comments. That's more than a number. It's a frequency signature, a coded response that confirms you're awake, aligned, and ready to receive what's been kept in spiritual storage for you. It's not superstition. It's synchronization. When your spirit says yes, the universe listens. Heaven responds. What follows isn't for everyone. Only those who are spiritually attuned will have the strength to absorb what's being revealed. This word is living armor, not meant to be heard once and forgotten, but to be returned to in your moments of need. What you thought was a small act of obedience may have been the move that blocked a storm. What looked like minor discipline may have rerouted destruction. Come back to this when your resolve trembles. Each listen layers fresh divine coverage over your soul. Let's go deeper. Let's begin where it all starts. Understanding that what looks ordinary in the natural is often a secret weapon in the spirit. To the casual observer, self-restraint looks uneventful. It's the skipped indulgence, the walk away from chaos, the quiet refusal to follow the crowd. But in the unseen realm, these moments are seismic. Every time you resist what once ruled you, you're not just showing control, you're reinforcing your spiritual perimeter. Every right decision isn't just behavior. It's a safeguard woven by divine wisdom. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $10 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. There were conversations you didn't entertain that could have turned your peace into poison. There were paths you didn't take that would have led to a trap. What felt like small inner battles were actually strategic victories in the higher realm. You weren't avoiding trouble. You were disarming it before it formed. You weren't just keeping routine. You were operating under divine strategy. The truth is, opposition often doesn't walk in loud and obvious. It sneaks in softly, wearing costumes of convenience. It hides danger inside harmless detours. But every time you chose vision over instant relief, you closed the entry point before harm could enter. That's not coincidence. That's grace fueled by commitment. That's discernment in motion. You didn't know it, but that no was a shield. That boundary was a weapon. That quiet moment of turning away was a divine recalibration. And what never touched you? It never had the chance, because your consistency canceled its invitation. Some burdens you were never forced to carry were ones you unknowingly blocked with your faithfulness. Some betrayals were unscheduled, because your consistency broke the timing of the trap. Some collapses were avoided entirely, because you stayed tethered to what was true when it would have been easier to give in to what was tempting. The divine saw every moment and responded. This wasn't about performance. This was preservation. Your daily dedication was heaven's infrastructure being built silently through your choices. What may have felt like restriction was actually elevation. You weren't losing out. You were being positioned. The foundation of your calling is being protected before the next elevation can arrive. Your lifestyle isn't simply good behavior. It's strategic obedience that puts you beyond reach of what was meant to derail you. And that's why resistance comes. Because a life that stays grounded in sacred alignment becomes impossible to manipulate. The forces that wish to distract you, they lose access when your inner world is fortified. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. This is what you've been doing. Walking through unseen minefields untouched, rerouting what was meant for harm into silence. It wasn't randomness. It was your discipline. Spirit-led. Heaven-backed. Powerful beyond what you imagined. Some threats don't arrive screaming. They slip through quietly, dressed in charm, cloaked in opportunity, smiling with familiar faces and smooth intentions. And that's exactly what makes them dangerous. You weren't spared because of luck. You were spared because your discernment overruled your distractions. The real danger wasn't in what you saw. It was in what you didn't see. You weren't given every detail for a reason. Sometimes if you knew what was really behind the door, the weight of it could break your focus. That silence, it was mercy. That delay, it was protection. There were nights when the restlessness pulled at you, and still you stayed put. That stillness rerouted you from places where harm was quietly waiting to unfold. Opportunities came cloaked in gold, but something in your gut nudged you to pause. You turned them down, not knowing the losses that would have followed. Smiles offered connection, but your spirit whispered, "Not this one." Later, truth revealed what you avoided. Manipulation, sabotage, emotional erosion masked as love. Some things that left your life weren't taken. They were filtered out. Not every locked door was a denial. Some were sealed shut because you were being rerouted from sabotage in disguise. You weren't being rejected. You were being redirected. There were people who smiled in front of you, but whispered against you behind closed doors. Plans were being drawn in secret places, yet nothing touched you. Why? Because unseen hands tore those schemes apart before they could breathe. There were settings where your name came up, not in praise, but as a target. But not a single curse was allowed to manifest. Conversations meant to unravel your reputation dissolved in silence. Your name carried protection, not because of who you are in the flesh, but because of who covers you in the spirit. Temptations returned, polished and familiar, hoping to awaken the old version of you. But this time, your alignment was too strong. What once pulled you no longer had power. That's not just growth, it's transformation. You didn't entertain the offer. You didn't play with fire. You didn't test the edge. And because of that, you never stepped into the traps that were carefully baited with your past. What you may have called boredom was actually a shield. What you thought was a missed connection was a severed snare. What looked like being overlooked was divine eyes turning your steps elsewhere before something false could capture your attention. The shift in your surroundings wasn't random. It was ordered. There's power in what never reached you. The moment you held your ground, the sequence of destruction was interrupted. Because you didn't chase every invitation. Because you refused to drift. Because you remained grounded even when it felt like nothing was moving. That's how spiritual immunity is built, step by step, choice by choice. You don't need to see every storm to know you've been kept from one. Sometimes the greatest grace isn't in what you're handed, but in what never touches you. The spiritual realm moves different. Presence matters more than ambition. Being where you're meant to be, when you're meant to be there, is what preserves your peace and protects your promise. You didn't just survive by instinct. You were guided, and that guidance kept you out of reach from snares that were hidden behind beautiful scenery. The covering over your life wasn't earned. It was honored. And every time you stayed the course, every time you chose patience over impulse, you stayed wrapped in that protection. This is why you're still standing. Not because you saw every threat, but because you followed the one who did. Restraint isn't weakness. It's mastery. The ability to pause when everything in you wants to react is not silence, it's spiritual force. The unseen realm doesn't tremble when someone shouts. It trembles when a chosen one chooses stillness over reaction, wisdom over impulse. That's when real warfare happens, not in chaos, but in control. Holding your peace when pressed isn't avoidance, it's strategy. What looks like doing nothing to others is, in truth, a dismantling of entire schemes. When you don't retaliate, when you don't let anger steer the wheel, when you choose pause instead of panic, you're not backing down. You're rising above the reach of darkness. You're building an atmosphere the adversary can't breathe in. There was a moment you nearly snapped, nearly responded, nearly said what was boiling in your chest, but you didn't. And that silence, that was a locked gate, a barricade. The enemy had already begun counting on your reaction. He had lined up fallout, fractured trust, tarnished witness, broken alignment. But your restraint erased his setup before it could activate. That moment you waited, that was a spiritual interception. Sometimes pressure comes packaged as blessing, as urgency, as too good to be true timing. But the one who waits, who listens first, who doesn't move until peace confirms permission, that person cannot be baited. Not every closed door is a delay. Some are exits disguised as offers. Your hesitation wasn't hesitation. It was divine clarity resisting deception. And when you chose not to explain yourself to someone who had already made up their mind about you, that was wisdom guarding your dignity. Some battles aren't yours to fight. They're distractions dressed up like duty. You knew there was no point in building bridges toward hardened hearts. So you let the echo of silence speak louder than your defense ever could. That moment wasn't passivity. It was power cloaked in humility. Most warfare doesn't crash in. It creeps in. Through shortcuts. Through unhealed reactions. Through unchecked emotion. But when you stay grounded, when you move with intentionality, you disrupt the cycle before it starts. That quiet resistance, that calm refusal, that's not an action. That's kingdom defense. Nobody celebrates the arguments you didn't have. No one claps for the boundaries you enforced quietly. There are no awards for the times you could have responded in ego, but chose alignment instead. But heaven sees. Heaven records. And darkness recoils. Because nothing frustrates spiritual attack like someone who's unshakable under pressure. The truth is, what you held back preserved your position. Your pause was prophetic. Your refusal to indulge the moment ensured you didn't forfeit your assignment. The tempter didn't want to destroy you with one big blow. He wanted to drain your focus, blur your clarity, erode your character just enough to stall your next elevation. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $10 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. But you didn't bite. You didn't break. And in that, you became dangerous, because a soul ungoverned by impulse becomes untouchable by manipulation. This is what spiritual maturity looks like. Not loud, not chaotic, but precise, firm, and rooted. You didn't respond emotionally because you're not driven by emotion. You're led by spirit. And spirit-led vessels don't chase validation. They don't beg to be understood. They protect the sacred within them. And because of that, they walk armored in peace while the battlefield rages beneath their feet. This is why restraint isn't empty, it's explosive. Why your quiet no shakes dimensions. Why your calm is confrontation. And why every act of self-control becomes a declaration that you are not ruled by the moment, but anchored in divine authority. And that terrifies the enemy. Patience isn't just waiting. It's trusting the process even when it feels like you're standing still while the world moves ahead. What you've endured wasn't stagnation. It was strategic positioning. There were moments where it felt like heaven was silent, like your prayers hit a wall, like everyone else was being elevated, but you were stuck. But in truth, you were being protected, not from small delays, but from consequences too heavy to carry. What you saw as postponement was divine preservation. Your decision to not rush, to not force open a door, became your protection plan. You were being shielded from things you didn't even know were being formed behind the scenes. Entanglements, losses, distractions, false alignments. That resistance you felt? It was sacred interference. You didn't need to see the full map. God saw ahead, and your surrender allowed him to reroute danger without your participation. You may have cried over paused plans, over opportunities that slipped away, over rooms you didn't get to enter. But what you called a missed moment was actually grace stepping in. You didn't know that what looked like elevation carried hidden snares, that the connection you almost made was wrapped in complication, that the yes you didn't receive saved you from weight that would have worn you down. What never arrived was part of the miracle. When nothing seemed to move forward, you may have questioned everything, but your decision to remain grounded, to not chase every door, to not bend to desperation, that was spiritual intelligence in action. You chose alignment over speed, and in doing so, you stayed inside the safety zone of divine timing, where no counterfeit could pull you out of position. Some of the best gifts from above are not additions, but removals. Not every later means denial. Some delays are a pause for clearance, a divine waiting room where the space is being cleared of threats before your arrival. You were spared, not because you begged for it, but because your faith whispered louder than your impatience. Had you moved early, you might have been caught in agreements that looked promising, but came with silent cost. Had you pressed ahead, you might have been surrounded by voices that would have weakened your clarity. You didn't lose your moment. You were reserved for the right one. What you didn't know is that your patience was disarming setups you never had to see. You thought you were behind, but you were being rerouted into perfect alignment. You stayed still while heaven removed obstacles from your path. That closed season wasn't punishment, it was preparation. And when the right moment comes, it will feel nothing like the resistance you once battled. You won't need to convince, perform, or strive. Doors will part without pressure. Provision will arrive unforced. What once required strain will now unfold with ease, because it will be time. Divine time. This is what trust built. A future you didn't have to build with your own strength. A path free of potholes, because you allowed heaven to pave it first. When you look back, you'll recognize it wasn't slowness. It was mercy. Not absence, but orchestration. You'll be grateful not just for what came, but for what never did. Because the very things that bypassed you were never meant to hold you. They were only distractions dressed as direction. And your destiny is far too sacred to be given to anything less than what was divinely designed for you. Not all safeguards are built from events or actions. Sometimes, they arrive in the form of people who never made it into your life. The most profound form of spiritual defense often isn't a dramatic moment. It's a quiet redirection. A subtle nudge away from a presence that looked pleasant on the surface, but carried disruption beneath. Some personalities aren't storms that announce themselves with thunder. They're more like smoke, quiet, elusive, but toxic if you let them linger too long in your atmosphere. Some connections weren't stopped by confrontation, but by internal clarity. Intuition whispered louder than introductions. Beneath soft voices and warm smiles were invisible strings that could have entangled you, but your spirit was tuned in. What felt like awkward hesitation was divine hesitation. You didn't ignore the subtle static behind their words, the misalignment in their rhythm, the contradiction between their energy and your assignment. You weren't being dismissive. You were being preserved. Your space wasn't available to everyone, not because of arrogance, but because your mission had to remain undisturbed. You declined invitations not out of fear, but out of discernment. You passed on certain conversations not to be rude, but to keep your peace intact. Misunderstandings came. Labels were attached. You were called hard to reach, too reserved, maybe even unfriendly. But what they never saw was that your quiet distance saved you from unseen chaos. It wasn't about being closed off. It was about being clear. The wisdom to bypass what glittered saved you years. Imagine if you'd accepted certain offers, embraced certain personalities, or allowed the wrong voice to guide your path. What appeared as genuine connection could have subtly bent your direction, gradually shifting you off course, not through violence, but through slow erosion of clarity. Sometimes false alignment arrives dressed in charisma and timing, and if you had said yes to it, your purpose might have been diluted before you ever noticed. Your restraint was an unspoken answer to heaven's leading. Certain relationships never formed because the ground wasn't healthy enough to plant in. Certain deals dissolved before they even began because your inner compass refused to compromise. Some doors never opened, and that silence became your rescue. The absence of certain people in your story isn't a loss. It's divine curation. Every boundary you enforced became a checkpoint for your destiny, where only the aligned could pass.